Greetings, everyone, and welcome to today's training in Proclaim. We're going to be talking with everybody about how we can add in and use sermons within Proclaim. It's going to take a couple minutes for everyone to filter in, so let's just go over a couple details. The first thing I want to let everyone know is that this video will be recorded and available on YouTube later. So if you would like to review this, or if one of your team members you'd like to be able to see this, it'll be able to pass it on to them. And the link for this should automatically be emailed to you when it's made available after it's done and posted to YouTube. So now that that's out of the way, I want to go ahead and just introduce myself. My name is Wyatt. I'm going to be answering questions and demonstrating some of the features of Proclaim here. And off to my right, we have Jordan, who's one of our developers. He's going to be here to also help with answering some of our questions. And between the two of us, we should be able to go over all the things that you want to know about getting your sermons into Proclaim. So today is going to be a little bit of showing things directly out of the program. There'll be a fair amount of screen sharing, but we really want to take this time to answer questions you have and go ahead and interact there. So you'll notice that when you're here watching us, you should see a Q&A panel in the right-hand side or in the upper right that you can activate. Once you click on that, you can type in questions, and then as we go through, we'll be able to answer those questions for you. So feel free to go ahead and just check out that. Ask any questions. For anyone that's here live, we'll answer those questions for you. And then when this is finished, this recording will go up and people can see the questions and responses. So if you're watching this in the future, we're sorry we missed you, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And if you're watching it right now, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is just open up Proclaim. I'm going to do, kind of in my mind, a couple of the methods and tools and tips that are helpful when creating and working with sermons. And then after that, I want to turn it into open Q&A. So again, what you can do is ask questions throughout this entire broadcast. And then as we get done with some of the demonstration and open up Q&A, we'll start working through your questions. So we're really excited you're here, and let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to be screen sharing a fair amount. And so you'll see it tunnel sometimes when it screen shares a screen share and goes off into infinity. But for now, let's jump into Proclaim. So here we are in the Proclaim program. I opened up one of our just seasonal presentations over here by clicking on New and the fall presentation. And now I'm just naming this webinar Adding Sermons. That way I've titled it and can easily find it later. And really, I'm just taking one of our seasonal presentations. I'm going to repurpose it a little bit. So the example presentation we have right now has the sermon title, Lead Like Jesus, and it has some survey or some scripture text, as well as a brief demonstration of a sermon outline. So one of the things that we're going to go over today is formatting content slides, the different ways you might add in sermons, and the best way that you can kind of manage your workflow. The good news here is there's not just one way to add sermons or use sermons in Proclaim. Proclaim is really flexible, and once you learn the tools and the way to interact with it, you'll have a great way to match whatever workflow and preference you have as you're creating sermons. So one of the most common ways we'll see people use sermons in Proclaim is good old-fashioned PowerPoint or Keynote. People have been making those for decades. They know how to do it, and so it's very common that you'll see people go into Proclaim, and then they'll want to add in a PowerPoint that they've already made for their sermon. So if you want to add in a PowerPoint item in Proclaim, you click on Add Item, and you'll notice here where it says Import from Keynote or PowerPoint. And when you choose the Import from Keynote or PowerPoint option, you can locate the slides that you want, and it will bring in that PowerPoint or Keynote presentation into Proclaim essentially as a slideshow service item. And so it'll turn all your slides into images. So this is great if what you want to do with your sermon coming in from Keynote or PowerPoint is just show text. But if you have transitions or some illustrations or a video that's included in your PowerPoint, this probably isn't the option for you because it just brings in those still images. However, you are also able to bring in videos and content and images throughout Proclaim, so you can easily create item by item the same presentation that you would have in a PowerPoint or a Keynote right here in Proclaim. We also have a couple of different ways that you can bring in PowerPoint and Keynote slides if that really is your preferred method. And so later on, if you have any questions about that, let us know, and myself or Jordan will be able to explain more of some of the process and tips that you can do there. So beyond just bringing in from Keynote and PowerPoint, you also can create your sermon through content items. And so let me give an example of this by starting with just a general content item. So again, I'm choosing add item and then content. Now, it's always good to name our content items so that we are able to find them quickly and anybody else collaborating with us knows what they're seeing. So I'm going to call this Sermon Slides Webinar. And the first thing I can do is I just have a general text box here, so I can start either writing in my sermon text, or if I've got text I've already prepared, I can copy and paste it in. So for this example, I'm going to act as if I'm writing it in here. So I'm going to say sermon point 1. And then you'll notice I have the ability to create bullets, so I'm going to say sub point 1. And subpoint isn't what I want, subpoint. And then I'll just copy this. Make it subpoint 2, subpoint 3, etc. And then I can take all of this content, copy it again, and I can start making multi-points. So if my sermon is kind of a classical 1, 2, 3 with sub-information, this is one way that I can start just getting the words into a content item. And you'll notice that here on the right, Proclaim is previewing each of those content items for me. And it's creating slides. But you'll also notice that right now it's not really formatted the way I probably want, because I have my sermon point 1 and all my subpoints, but then on the same slide you see sermon point 2, etc. Now, first I want to explain why the program is doing it this way, and then I want to explain how we can have a little bit more control. So let's start by actually adding in a background to give a better understanding of why the program is acting the way it is. So I'm going to click on Browse Media, and I'm going to locate a new sermon background. And I actually like this new Autumn Forest from one of our recent Pro Media packs. And so I'm going to choose the motion background version of this, which I know is a motion background because it has this little play button here in the corner. So I'm going to choose the motion version, and I'm going to apply that to the current item. We see it sync here in the upper right and bring it in. Now the reason I can write so much text here on the left and the program dynamically creates the slides for me here on the right is because this way I can do all my content having just picked one background, and I don't need to make multiple items throughout my order of service in order to accomplish having the various points of my sermon. The downside here, as you've noticed, is that right now it's not formatted in the order I want, and what I'd actually like is to have sermon point 1 with its subpoints be one slide, sermon point 2 with its subpoints be second slide, sermon point 3 its own slide, and so on. So to do that, what I can do here is just press enter to make a space, and then you'll see this button right here in the left-hand editing options, and this is called a slide break. It looks like a little triangle intersecting two horizontal, just horizontal squares. No, vertical. I'm forgetting the name of what this is called, but geometry aside, if I press this key, you'll notice that it actually splits my slide right here into separate slides for me. I'm going to do the same thing right here again. Now you'll notice that the symbol is actually two small dashes, so I can press the button, or as I'm typing, I can just type in two small dashes. And what's just happened is now we have formatted our slides, sermon point 1, sermon point 2, and sermon point 3, in such a way that they are each on their own slide. Now, the next thing that you'll often will hear requests about is people would like to know how they can get their text to fade in so that each point can appear one at a time. So the easiest way to accomplish that is at the start of any line that you want to fade in, add in 2 plus signs. And what you'll start to see, the points will then begin to fade in for you. So I'm going to just make these quick changes here. And you'll notice that when you're doing this, the plus signs come after the bullet points in your order. So as I drop these in, we're going to jump into preview mode and see what this actually functionally looks like. So now I'm going to jump in a preview. And we see sermon point 1, the subpoints begin to drop in. Then sermon point 2, points drop in. Sermon point 3, subpoints, etc. So you'll see that pretty easily there, we just typed out our sermon points. We're able to use the slide breaks to create space, and then use the plus signs to create fade in for each of the points that we're creating. So that's just a little bit of tips on editing and using content items. And you'll notice that any change I make is dynamically being updated, which is great, so I can test it in real time. But there's a couple of things you're probably wishing you could do right now that you haven't seen. The first thing I imagine that you'd like to do is have an actual introduction to your sermon slide. So to do that, let's go ahead and go into the media browser. And luckily, since we were just working in Autumn Forest, that's saved for us. So we see the other Autumn Forest options. So right here, I'm going to choose the title of the sermon. And I'm going to add that as a new content item. You'll see that drop in right here below. And I can just drag and drop it above. So I'm reordering it in the sermon. And now that this example, lead like Jesus, is we're not really using this, I can actually take this out, so that we're now just working with the sermon we're making. Now again, we're going to title it. So let's say sermon title for webinar. And I can title my sermon. And so let's say that this example is, we're exploring God's love. Subtitle. Maybe we haven't picked that for this particular sermon yet, but we do know that John 3:16 is the verse we're going to be focusing on. So now as I make that and I jump into preview, we see that now we have the slide that we're looking for, and then we get into all the sermon points. So we've created a title, we've created sermon points. Now that we've done both those things, I want to just take a minute and show you how we can start bringing in examples and doing that well in different capacity. So it's very, very common that when you're preaching your sermon, you either have a bit of text at the start or lots of Bible text throughout. So one of the ways that we can bring in Bible text here in the program is by clicking on Add Item and choosing the Bible item. And once I bring in a Bible item, I can do John 3:16. I can choose the translation that I want. And one thing I hear from pastors is that sometimes they want to show just partial verses, not whole verses. So I can come in here and I can actually bring a verse down to just part of its fragment so that we can show just partial verses as we're working. So now we're in John 3:16a. So just a couple of different ways that we can go ahead and be working here as we're editing out our text. And now, again, we can show our title, have our Bible verse, and get into the meat of our actual sermon points. Now here within the Bible verse, it's entirely possible, though, that we'd like it to be a matching background to the rest of the sermon. So you'll notice that when I choose the background option, I can browse, or the program is now suggesting me media that goes along with what I already have in here. So I'm just going to choose the option that has the Bible text. It's in the same style as my title and the same style as my sermon. So now I've got a Bible verse to go in. Another common way that we'll want to show verses is as you're actually working here within your slide. So it may be that as you go into sermon point 2, you have a new Bible verse that you'd like to show. And so in order to bring in that Bible verse, what you can go ahead and do is actually embed Bible text. So to embed Bible text, what you want to do is enter 2 square brackets, the scripture reference, and then cap it off with 2 square brackets again. And what that actually does is creates I'm going to jump into this so you can see here. Notice that it'll show sermon point 2, and then right where we enter that embedded text, it shows us the Bible verse, and after it shows us the verse, we jump into our subpoints. So again, we've just learned how to create a title for our sermon, to show text using Bible items, or to use a content item with the background of our choice, bring in our points, have them fade in, have slide breaks at the various slides that we want to show, and embed the Bible text. So I could embed all sorts of text if I'm preaching on multiple texts in the same section, or it may be that I'm going to do an expository sermon where I'm going to go through John 3:10 through 18, and so each sermon point will be based off of an individual verse, and I'm going to have maybe 8 different main points, and I want to show the verse right after each point. So I can just embed verses in every single main section here. Another one of the great things we can do when we're putting together our sermons is we can use the on-screen Bible. So if I go into Add Item and On-Screen Bible, I can enter a reference, and this time, let's say that we are going to be going through John 3:10 through 18. So as I enter that, you'll see that the program is going to quickly spin up for me the slides that are going to be shown to the congregation as we go through the text. And if I want, I can change the style of the on-screen Bible. But in this case, actually, I really do like the style. And I can also add in more references if it's the case may be that we're talking not just about John 3:10 through 18, but also other Bible references as well. So once I've done this, I'm going to go ahead and drag this. And so now we see that we're starting our sermon. From our sermon, we want to go into the text, and we're going to read it as a congregation, maybe aloud. Scan through each of the text, and then we jump right into our scripture. So again, all we're doing here is we've very quickly been able to put together points using general content items, using the on-screen Bible and the Bible item, or embedding Bible verses within our content items, and using a title slide found in the sermon browser. And again, it's easy for us to match backgrounds to the suggested backgrounds tool. Now that I've done all this, I want to talk a little bit about some of the other things that I see pastors doing in the program and how we can accomplish those well. So one example is some pastors like to bring in certain images, or they like to bring in certain like maps and other important things. So within the program, we can actually bring in a foreground image. So we have an image on top of a slide. Now we can do that by clicking this button here in the upper right, which looks like a sun rising up over a mountain. And as we click on that item, you'll notice that we can choose Browse Media. We can go ahead and find a piece of media that we're wanting. So for example, let's just say that there's a piece of Bible art that I want to add in for John 3:16. So I'll type in John 3:16, find the art I want to use, and I say that I want to add that to the foreground. Now that will bring in the photo of the foreground, but you'll notice it does that on every single slide. And unless I actually want to have a item where this art is being included in every slide, then the case may be that I actually don't want to have this image be on every slide. And so rather than putting it in the foreground, it may be that I simply want to add that in that image as a visual representation when I'm preparing my sermon. So instead of doing it as a foreground image, I'm going to add item. I'm going to go ahead and go back to content. And then when I go ahead and browse media, I'll just apply that to the current item. Now, the great thing is, now that I have this Bible text, I can take this and I can have it both in my sermon as we're going through and chatting, but I can also copy this and I can paste it up in my pre-service loop or my post-service loop. So I can have a Bible verse relating to the text that we're going to be talking about in the sermon, going ahead and being presented in the pre-service loop to the congregation while they're waiting for service to start and they're all talking. So it's a great way to create reflection before the sermon even starts using that illustration. Another one of the common things we'll see is that it may be that people want to include a map when they're preaching. So for this demonstration, I actually want to go into the media browser. I'm going to clear out all my current search terms. And I want to go down here to where it says Logos Media. because I'm also a Logos Bible software user, as many of the pastors that use Proclaim are, I have access to some great, particularly exclusive content for use in creating sermons as I bring things in from Logos. And one of the things that I have in here is access to a ton of maps. And these maps are maps that I can use for my sermon illustration. So it may be that I'm talking through the book of John, which I'll find by just searching John right here, that I want to include this map from the book of John. So I can add this as a new content item. So I bring in the map and I can chat about that during the sermon. But one thing you might be saying is, what if I want to see this map in between my various sermon points? That's a great question, and it's a really common thing that people do want to do. It could be that the map relates particularly to subpoint 3. So what I can do is I can actually, and this gets really creative, we're going to duplicate the sermon slides we have so far. And I'm going to title this first one, Sermon Slides, point 1 and 2. Now I'm going to call this new one, Sermon Slides Webinar, point 3. And then I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to cut out everything after point 2, now that I've created my script and my notes for this coming sermon from this first one. And I'm going to cut out everything in this one before sermon point 3. And then I'm just going to drag that map right here into the center. And now let's go ahead and have an example. So for this, we're going to jump into the preview mode, and let's just say that we start with this first art made by our designers here as one of the introductory points for our sermon. We move into the title of the sermon, which has the reference text. We all read the scripture together. We're able to go through the scripture verses by verse, focus on the specific verse we want to, jump into our main points, advance through those points as we're preaching. Notice that we have the embedded Bible verse again. Continue moving through. See the map that we've brought in to talk about where they were as this was being spoken about in John. Go through sermon points 3, and that's what we have so far. And so just for a frame of reference, it looks like in about 20 minutes, we put together the core of what we want our sermon to look like. Now, obviously, times are going to change. You're going to have different amounts of content that you want to bring in. But right now, we're seeing is lots of ways that we can, again, break apart pieces. So I'm going to start going and looking at some of the questions here. And what we're going to do is just go through each of the questions here on the right. If you have a question that isn't already being asked, feel free to ask it using the Q&A there. Jordan, who's here with me, is going to be helping answer some of those questions. And so actually back, I'm going to share the screen again. Back on the event page for this for our webinar, you're going to see that we're going to be posting answers to questions with content here in this window. So we will post and see answers right here below the actual event. So feel free to go ahead and check those out as we're working. But for now, we want to go ahead and jump right into some of these questions. I appreciate people who are +1ing the questions so we know which ones you're all interested in. So this first one was asked by John Long. And the question was, will the recording of this webinar be available to watch again after it's over? The answer is yes. For any of you who weren't here at the start, this webinar will be automatically posted to our YouTube channel when this is finished. And I believe you will all get an email regarding that, so that you can then share that with your team or watch it and review it again at your guys' leisure. So it looks like Clau asks, is there a way to change colors or properties of the font without affecting the other ones in the same slide or service item? Great question. The answer is yes. So let's go back to our example sermon that we've just put together. So I'm going to screen share. We're back here in Proclaim. And let's exit preview and go back to the edit screen. So let's say that there is a particularly important point. So my subpoint now for sermon point 3 is no longer just subpoint 1. Maybe it is that God loves the world. And I want to emphasize that he loves the world. Not just me and the people I know, but the entire world. So what I can do is I can use this emphasis text option. Emphasis text is accessed through this button right here. And when I choose emphasis text, it will give it a color to make it pop out. Now, it may be that I want to do a different emphasis color, and so I can switch that to one of the various options that are here and make sure that I like that against the background I'm working with. So in this case, I think I like a little bit of a lighter one. And now we'll go into the preview mode. And we know that God loves the world. So again, I'm using the emphasis text option, which is right here next to the slide break option in the editing. And then I'm choosing the color that I want. And I can do that on lines of text, specific words, anything I want to highlight for my audience. I also can use italicize and bold either through the edit options or just with Control or Command-I, Control-Command-B to create emphasis as well when I'm working. So hope that answers the question, Cloud. If there's any follow-ups, feel free. And again, for anyone else, if this is a great time, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask about making sermons in Proclaim or interacting with the program, go ahead and ask those questions. We're more than happy to help. So Samuel asks, when you have a lot of slides in a single item, is there a way to split the slides to be saved as separate items within the service? Great question, Samuel. So we went over this a little bit, but I'm going to go back into the program. And so again, when you want to take a lot of slides in a single item and format them and separate them out, then we go ahead and use that slide break option as we're adding content. When we want to make them separate items so that we can then put sermon illustrations in between, again, the best way to do that typically is to just double or right click on an item, duplicate it, make sure that I name it the way that I want. So maybe now I'm breaking it up even further, and I want this to be just point 1, and I want this to be just point 2. One thing I noticed is that right now, my sermon slides, the title's pretty long. And so I'm actually going to take out some of this just so on the order of service here on the left, I can more easily read and notice things on the fly. And then again, Samuel, in answer to that question, as I'm editing and making this a little bit easier to access, I'll now take out everything that isn't point 1 in sermon point 1 and everything before point 2. And now these are distinct service items, which I can then drag, reorder, and add other content in between, such as a video or an image or other sermon illustrations that I'm working in. All right, and Samuel asks, is there a special way to encode text files before they are recognizable as songs in Proclaim?
You want me to answer this?
Yeah, so this is actually a good question for Jordan, who's sitting here with us. So he's going to jump in and answer this question from Samuel.
So Proclaim, the import feature is normally when you're exporting from other software. So let's see, I have Proclaim open right now on my other computer.
Also screen share.
Oh, I can screen share. How do I do that?
Screen share is the green button. And then watch the entire screen.
Entire screen share.
Go to the far right side.
Oh, wow. Okay. Screen sharing now. So you've probably gone into import songs. Then you tried to choose song files and chose a text file of yours and it didn't work. The import songs feature only works for these different formats listed on the left. So you can click on one of those to figure out how to export your songs. If you just have like a text file, the easiest way is to just add a new song item and paste your lyrics in. And so I just would copy and paste my lyrics right in here and then type a song title and Proclaim will automatically save that and you can use it again in the future. If you have like a pile of songs in text format that you're trying to import, I would suggest posting on our forums. I've actually imported songs for people in the past before who had like a ton and they couldn't get it to work. So I kind of came up with a solution on my end and imported it for them. So if that's a case that you're in, you could post on our forums and we'll be happy to try to help you. I don't know how to turn that off. No problem.
So again, in answer to that question, you can, if you have an image or a text file for a song that you're trying to go ahead and work with, then you can go through the import song option. If you already are bringing from a specific program to Proclaim, you can paste your items into a song item that you make. You can import lyrics from the song item page, or if you have a large batch of song and text form that you want to add, go ahead and message us on the forums, and I'm going to show you how you can get to the forums from within Proclaim. So we're going to go back to screen sharing, and here within Proclaim, if you click on Help here in the upper left and choose the View Online Forums option, that'll take you right into the forums where you can post, ask questions of our team, let them know that you have a bunch of song items that you're trying to bring in, and we'll be able to help you out. All right, Vance asks, when adding images to the foreground or adding other text boxes, is there a way to order the layers, or are they just layered in the order you enter them?
I'm pretty sure they're in the order you entered them.
Yeah.
So if you want to change the order, you'll have to delete the one you first added and add it again.
Yeah, so currently it's in the order that you add them. So if you want to put in a foreground image and then put a custom text field on top of it, you'll want to put the image first, followed by the text field.
That's not necessarily true. It looks like we always put text fields above.
Okay, and text fields go above images. So that is helpful for you. And you can again see, so to do either of those things I just mentioned from within the program, when I am creating, so let's say I'm adding a new content item, I can bring in a foreground image right here, either by browsing or uploading. And then let's just say, for example, that this text field wasn't currently here, so I just have a blank item. I could bring in an image, and then right here with this button, that's the T is for the text field. I can choose that, and I can add in a text field or a custom text field or all sorts of things and customize my content. So you can make very customized items and templates as well when you're working. All right. John asks, is there a way to use a Mac Mini hooked to a projector to run the presentation while using a laptop upstairs to control the presentation? Which is a little bit less of a sermon question, but we're still happy to answer it for you.
You want me to answer it? Or
yeah, go for it.
should I take your laptop first?
Yeah, go for it.
I've done this at my church before, and so yeah, you could plug your Mac Mini into the projector and then run Proclaim on the Mac Mini. And then if you have a Mac laptop, there's actually an application. Let me see if I can find it. There's an application that comes on your Mac called screen sharing. And so screen sharing works. Oh, here it is. It's super easy. And you can type in like the name of your computer into this that popped up, or when you open up a Finder window, you'll be able to see under shared, you'll be able to see your Mac Mini listed there, and then you can click on it and click screen sharing, and it will just work. And then you can use your laptop to screen share to your Mac Mini and control it that way. Screen sharing does have to be turned on here in the settings. And if you have any more questions, you can post on our forums, and I'd be happy to walk you through it. But yes, it's possible, and I've done it before.
All right, so right now I'm only seeing one other question here from Monica. So if there's anyone else here who has questions or would like to answer them, again, you can use the Q&A feature. It should be there on the screen. You can click that button if you haven't already and ask or see answered questions. So please feel free to go ahead and do that. We're going to get through this question. I'm going to show you how to contact us. And then if there's no other new questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up. But if there are questions, we're happy to keep answering them for you. So Monica asked, sometimes I would rather Proclaim didn't reduce the size of the font I'm using. Is there a way to turn that off? So I'm trying to think about when you say reduce the font, without knowing exactly, I'm going to try and guess at what you're referring to. But if you want to clarify that for me in another question here on the side, Monica, I'm glad to go ahead and use that as well. But here's what I imagine you're speaking about. So when I go back into sharing the screen, and I'm here in Proclaim, you'll see that if I start typing in content in Proclaim, but not breaking it up on a sentence, let's see, how great is our God? I'm going to take this, copy it, just for example, I want to add in so much text that you'll notice how the program is trying to wrap the text. And as it does that, the program will try and keep the text that you've put into a content item into and try and preserve basically the size of the space in the text that you're bringing in. Another example of this is in a song. So let's go ahead and go look here at Amazing Grace. So the first slide, or the first line of Amazing Grace is Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. But let's say that Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me was actually one line within the program. You'll notice that now the text is getting smaller compared to the rest of the text here in the preview on the right. And we even have a message that one or more lines of this item has been scaled to fit the slide. And they say if you add a line break, you can refine the layout. So again, this is happening because Proclaim wants to preserve the integrity of the lyrics that you enter into the program. And for that reason, it's trying to fit the entire line that you've entered in as one line of a song onto a slide, but the font size is too large for that to be kept at the same size, and so it's prioritizing preserving the text over the font size you've chosen. So in order to overcome that, you want to just, again, separate those out again, and you'll notice that now it returns back to a normal size. And it could be that even this is still smaller than you like, so you could up the font size and turn verse 1 into 2 separate slides so that there's more space for it to grow. So those are some of the ways that you can affect and change font size within Proclaim, especially within song items where we hear this question asked. So I hope that helped you, Monica. If that wasn't an answer to your question, I'd be happy to go ahead and answer that question. Feel free to clarify. All right, everybody, so we're kind of coming up on the end. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to give you all our contact information. So if you have any follow-ups to this or you'd like to know more, you can reach out to us. And so I'm going to do that from within Proclaim, but before we go, we're going to check and see if there's any other questions. So this is the last chance to jump in and add some more questions if you have something you'd like to know today. Excellent. I see one coming in. Let's go ahead and keep those coming if you have those questions. But right now, let me just give you our contact information if you want to follow up from today. So if you want to reach us, go ahead and find us at hello@proclaimonline.com. Or from within our forums, you can go ahead and contact us. Again, to reach us in the forums, you can go ahead and go from within Proclaim up into the upper left at Help and do the View Online Forums option. You also can click the View Online Help option, which will take you to the Help section of our program, where you can ask questions like, how do I edit a song? And then find information relating to that question. So just a few of the ways that you can go ahead and contact us and find more information as you're working in Proclaim. So again, if you want to reach us, it's hello@proclaimonline.com. Send us an email with questions, feedback. If you loved what we talked about today, if you wish we'd focused on something else, or we had more information for you, let us know. Your feedback is really helpful in making sure that these webinars and these training opportunities best serve you, because that's who we're here to care about. All right, I want to take a look now at some of the other questions that are coming in from Vance. So Vance asks, when I am already using the main text box on the content slide and want to add another text box, it seems as if the only options are single lines of text. Is that right, or is there a way to have 2 multi-line text boxes on a slide?
Yeah, you're right. You can only have one multi-line text field.
Yeah.
And that's, do you want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
And that's partially because of the fact that we do the smart slide breaks where you do the dash dash and click the button. And so the way it's set up that it's catered to having 2, because how if you had 2 and you put slides, what happens? So this is something we've heard before, and so we just give feedback. But yeah, this time step one.
However, you could use multiple single-line text fields if you're trying to get in certain information. And we always welcome your feedback. So in the forums or an email to us, if there's a way that you think this would be better serving your workflow and it's something that we can accommodate, let us know. We're always happy to hear that feedback and see how we can improve the program for you. All right, Samuel asks, it is default to show the previous item whenever you go offline and back online again, unless you type Control F5. Is there a way to insist that highlighted items should go online whenever you go online? So I think, Samuel, what you mean is that whatever currently selected service item, when you're in Proclaim, so say my currently selected service item is the sermon title, but that when I go on air, it takes me to the first slide of my presentation, which is the welcome slide at the start of my pre-service loop. So my guess is what you're asking is there a way to make it so that from whatever currently highlighted item, when I press on air, it goes there? That is not an option currently, but what you can do is from any given item, double click on it or right click and choose Go on Air. And you can go on air straight from that item. So rather than having to do the Command or Control F5, you can just choose the item that you want to go on air from, and then from the controlling booth, do it just like that. And once you're live, so we're on air right now, if I'm editing and if I'm controlling this for the congregation, I can always go ahead and say from grid view, which is another way of displaying this, look at the slides I'm working in. Maybe I notice that I want to change something. I can edit and change that really quick, go back into the grid view, and then jump to the slide that I just edited once I want to show it by just clicking and selecting options from here within grid view. So you have a few options for navigation and when you're wanting to go on air. I hope that answers and helps meet some of those needs for you, Samuel. Jolene asks, can I determine the speed of how the bullet points fade in? It's a great question. Currently, we don't have an option to edit that, but we've heard a few people say that in terms of transition times, it'd be nice to have some level of control there. So it's definitely feedback that we've received, and we're interested in looking about how we can meet that in the future. So right now, fade in text is fixed at the amount of time that it takes. However, that could be something that we open up and change a little bit moving forward. And again, for anyone who missed that part or wants to know, whenever you want to make fade in text in a content item like a sermon, we'll go ahead and just show you that again. To make a fade in text, we go into a sermon point, and you'll see that anywhere we have 2 plus signs before a point, that will cause it to fade in. So when you're previewing, you have your main point, and then the other points are fading in, and that's because we've set them up with these plus signs so they know to fade in over time. All right, Samuel asks, my church wants to know if we can buy an outright copy of Proclaim instead of essentially the subscription option, because they're a small church. And he asks, is this possible? So Proclaim is available only as a subscription in either monthly or annual options, rather than it being available as a one-time purchase. And the reason for this is because we are constantly improving the program. Jordan over here and the rest of the team work every week to create new items and new abilities and features within Proclaim to improve your guys' services. And so what we want to do is always be providing you the newest and best program, and we find the subscription model is the best way that we can do that for you so that we get to hear your feedback, have this ongoing relationship, and deliver you fantastic content. And so one thing I'm excited to let you guys know is keep an eye open this next week coming up on Monday. There's a fantastic new feature that's going to be coming available for all Proclaim users, and that's a direct outcome of us being able to provide it as a subscription. So you'll see a great new feature, and these new features are made possible by this being a subscription where we hear from you and we deliver new and greater content. So the short answer is no, there's not an outright copy, but we were trying to tailor the subscription options so that it helps at all church budgets, and so that we deliver you fantastic, great new features that really help save you time and impact the ministry of your church. Vance says, thank you, to which I say, you're welcome. And he says, there are times when it would be nice to have side-by-side columns of text. For instance, keeping a scripture portion on one side of the screen and notes on the other. I think
that's the multi-line thing.
Yeah, multi-line. That's actually, I think, a really cool and a good idea. But again, right now in the way that our program uses smart text within Proclaim to format backgrounds, text, and save you time as it works, that isn't something we currently have set up. But I like that idea. So Jordan's going to actually take a note of that, and we'll make sure that we bring up, is there ways to make that possible as we look into the future? And one thing to know for you, especially as pastors and people who are presenting Proclaim and leading sermons, I want to just show you this within Proclaim. There's an option here on any given service item where I can have notes for that item. And these are notes for me rather than for the person who is, or for the congregation. So here in my notes, while I have sermon points 1, 2, and 3, it might be that I have more of a manuscript if I'm a manuscript preacher. So manuscript with what I want to say to my congregation. Now, these notes I can use through a confidence monitor. So I can view those notes if I'm wanting to, say, have a special screen just for me while I'm up on the pulpit. Or I can actually use my tablet to remote control Proclaim, and I can view my notes from my tablet using the Proclaim remote app. So one of the great things you can do is see the notes that you're speaking from side by side with the slides that you want to present when you're running off of the tablet using the Proclaim remote. So again, that remote app is found on the App Store and the iOS. Or in the Google Play Store, and you can use that, especially on a tablet-sized screen, to see your notes side by side with controlling the program. If you're on a phone-sized screen, you can just control the program or view things independently. So, all right. Looks like we've answered everybody's questions so far. Again, if you want to reach us, it's hello@proclaimonline.com. And actually, we would love to hear from you. If you had a chance to learn something new today, if you'd like to learn something else, if there's something new in Proclaim you want to know more about, please email us your feedback from today, anything that you liked, anything that you'd like to know more about. It's really important to us so that we know how to best serve you. So thank you all for being here, from myself and from Jordan. We appreciate it. And from the rest of the team, feel free to find us on the forums or send us an email at hello@proclaimonline.com. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.